Hey Lease fam, it's your girl Bella. Welcome back to my channel. So in today's video we're going to talk about why you should never rent an apartment or lease an apartment without first doing the things mentioned in this video. So I am 24 years old and I'm at an age where a lot of people around me are moving to apartments either for their first time or they've had multiple apartments. And there are a lot of things that you just don't know when you haven't had an apartment before. So I'm going to be giving an exhaustive list of all the things you should make sure you do before you ever rent an apartment. So this first category is all about cleanliness because that's something that is so important to me, especially as someone who lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I live in the South where summer times get hot, insects come out, and cleanliness just means a whole lot to me. So one thing you should know is that when you look at an apartment, there's always model units. So the model units are going to be always clean and always nice because those are the units that they take guests to when they're looking to lease a unit. And some apartments will take extra care of the hallways in the model units. So sometimes if you go to an apartment, that hallway will look spotless, glorious, magnificent, like they vacuum, they mop, they do whatever. And in reality, the other floors they don't take as much care of, but they take a lot of extra care with the model units floor because that's what people are going to see. So when you go to tour an apartment, I would recommend that you ask to see different floors. So whenever you tour an apartment, if there are rooms available, you can sign a lease that same day. So ask them which apartment you would be in. Let's say the model unit is on floor 2, but your unit will be on floor 5. Ask to see how floor 5 looks because you'll be surprised how many times the other floors look a lot worse and are a lot less maintained, and that can lead to different issues such as pests and just horrible things like that. Along the lines of the hallways, I would go ahead and ask how often are the grounds cleaned. Again, places that tend to be cleaned the most are the lobby, the gym, the rec room, the common area rooms that lots of residents go to and that are shown during tours are the rooms that will always be the cleanest. And so I would actually ask how often are the hallways cleaned. When I got my first apartment, I didn't know these things, and so when I moved in, my floor that I actually was living on was not as nicely maintained as the floor where the model units were. And when I moved to this new apartment, that was something that I asked every leasing manager. I was like, how often do y'all clean the hallways? And the answer better be more than once a week. At least if you want my coin, like it better be more than once a week that you're cleaning these hallways. So that's another thing that I'll go ahead and ask is how often do they come and clean the hallways of the building. This is also important because a lot of places have valet trash, and if they do have valet trash, you are gonna want the unit to be clean, the floors to be cleaned more often because people don't always do valet trash correctly. When you have valet trash, you're supposed to put your trash in the can and put your can outside, but some residents will put their trash in a bag and then put it outside, and that can lead to leakage. And so if the halls are not being cleaned that often, that can also attract pests. And I just hate pests, and like I said, I live in the South, so I'm not trying to play with them big old roaches. Another area that you can check out is the stairways. And sometimes stairways can be a little creepy. I kind of avoid the stairs unless it's like a fire drill, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to walk through them and see like if those are also maintained. Now some little cobweb and dust isn't a big deal, but like if you're seeing like pizza boxes and beer cans or throw up, like, and you'd be surprised. It's another thing to just look out for and be aware of. Another thing to know is that when you step into your unit, your cabinet finishes may be different. This is a small thing, but it isn't at the same time. So the first apartment that I toured, the model unit had like gray cabinets, and when I moved in they were dark brown. Now honestly, I prefer the dark brown, so I didn't really care. It did kind of make filming in my kitchen kind of hard though because of the lighting, but I have noticed that, and I've heard this from other people too, is that when they move into a unit, the finishes are different. Sometimes every other floor has a different color finish. Like one floor might have brown cabinets, the next floor has white cabinets, and then it's brown cabinets, and it's white cabinets. Sometimes it just varies by floor. If the finish of the cabinets is something that you really care about, or the finish of like the hardware and things like that, I would also ask how the finish will be in your unit if it's going to be the exact same as the model, because sometimes it's not. Another really important thing is extra fees. So when you get an apartment, usually the cost of rent is not the only fee that you're paying. There are a lot of other fees that you're paying, and if you don't pay attention, then you can end up paying extra for things that you weren't aware you're going to be paying for. So some people assume that the only extra fees are going to be Wi-Fi and energy, which is typically paid for outside of your apartment through a third-party provider, but there are also lots of other extra fees. Some of these fees include valet trash or just regular trash. Every apartment I've lived in has had valet trash, which is usually like $25, but I know like my roommate Brooklyn, her old building didn't have valet trash, but they still paid for trash, and it was like more expensive than valet trash was. So valet trash, regular trash, water, sewage, pest control. Some places make you pay an additional fee for parking, and then also amenities are sometimes not included in rent. All of my apartments I've lived in have always have amenities and parking included, but some places do not. So those are extra fees that may be included. And before you sign a lease, I would definitely ask the leasing agent about any additional fees that would be tacked on top of rent. And this is just something that I think is very important, because you may look at an apartment and be like, wow, this apartment is so cheap, it's such a good price, but then in reality there are lots of extra fees. And you know, it's kind of like flying Spirit. You get a flight and it's super cheap, but then you have to pay for your seat, you gotta pay for water, you gotta pay for your bags. So it's like sometimes you're better off just paying a little bit more, because the price ends up balancing out at the end of the day. Another important thing is security. So it's really important to know the security of your building. Does your building have concierge? Concierge is a great thing to have in a building, especially if it's 24-hour on-site concierge. You can rest assured knowing that your building is always under surveillance. Some people may not like this because they feel like they're always being watched, but in an apartment building with so many people coming in and out, it is like to your benefit to always be watched. Now, of course, not all apartments have concierge, but there are other things to keep in mind when it comes to security. Most buildings have a feature where you cannot enter a building without being fobbed in. But some buildings do not have that feature, and the only time you have to be fobbed in or put in a code is for your actual unit door. Now this is a really big deal, especially if you're like a woman and you're living by yourself. You don't want to be in a building where anyone can access it and walk up to your door. Like, that is extremely dangerous and it's not safe. Another important thing that you should ask about is if your building allows units to be Airbnb'd out. So this, depending on what you're getting an apartment for, can or cannot be beneficial to you. If you are just someone who's living in a building and you do not want to Airbnb out your unit, it can actually be pretty annoying if other people in your unit do Airbnb, because sometimes it lowers the security of the building. If a building allows for units to be Airbnb'd out, sometimes the security measures in terms of like how you can access doors and entry points is lower. Some buildings will not even have key fobs to go into the building because they know people are Airbnbing out of it, so that can make the security measures a little bit lower. And additionally, if people are doing Airbnb in your building, it may be louder, it may be a little bit just maybe more loud, and just more people coming in and out, like different people each time. So if you do want to Airbnb out a unit, then I mean, it's in your benefit to find an apartment that has those options. But if you're just trying to live somewhere and you don't plan on Airbnb out your apartment unit, then you're probably going to want to avoid apartments that allow units to be Airbnb'd out. I'd also recommend that you visit the apartment multiple times. Sometimes when you visit an apartment, if they have a lot of amenities, you may not see them all in one tour. And also you may just notice things a second time around. Now, everyone doesn't have the option to tour a building more than once, but if you do have that option, then I would definitely go ahead and do that as well. And if you see residents in the building while you're touring, it wouldn't hurt to ask them how they enjoy living there. The goal of a leasing agent is to sell you an apartment unit and get you to sign a lease. That's how they get paid. It is in their best interest to only say great things about the apartment, but if you ask people that live there, they may be able to tell you their honest truth about how they feel being a resident in that building. I would also highly recommend that you look up reviews, and not just on one platform. Look at reviews on Google, on apartments.com, and on Yelp. You'd be surprised how some apartments have a high review on Google but a low review on Yelp, or vice versa. Sometimes that's because some apartments will delete reviews that are not high, or they will make bot accounts and put fake reviews in that are high. So I think it's really important to look on multiple places and see what kind of reviews are being received. Depending on who you are, there are a couple of different red flags you can look out for. One big one, and probably the biggest red flag, is if the property management does not answer the phone. So if you go to call and they don't answer the phone, that's a big deal. Or even if you see reviews saying that, because usually when you call an apartment complex, there will be different options. You might hit like one for leasing, and leasing is pretty much almost always going to answer the phone because they want to lease out a unit. But if it's like a maintenance request or things like that and they just don't respond, that's a huge deal, because you don't want to be living in a place where the property management is not taking care of the building and is not taking care of your concerns as a resident. Another big red flag is if maintenance requests take forever. I've been blessed that I have not lived in a unit where maintenance requests take a long time was an issue. At my old building, it'll probably take like 2-3 days, but I didn't have like requests that were like urgent, they were like pretty low urgency levels. If they were more urgent, it would be like the next day. At this new building I'm living in, they get answered like the same day or the next day, sometimes like 2 hours later. Like my last maintenance request got answered in like 2 hours. So it is a pretty big deal if maintenance requests take a long time to be answered, especially if it's a big issue such as like an HVAC or air conditioning or washer and dryer breaking, like those bigger things that need to be reviewed right away and reconciled. You don't want to be in a building where maintenance requests are not being taken seriously. Another big thing is if you see the same complaints over and over. Some people are just negative and they're going to leave a negative review. But if you see the same sort of complaint all the time, like you're seeing multiple people saying there are car break-ins, multiple people saying there's an issue with like drugs, multiple people saying there's an issue with maintenance requests or with the phone not being picked up, that should be a red flag to you, because more than one person saying it over and over and over again will show you that it's a pattern that has not been resolved and you don't want to live there. Another thing is if you see the management replying and they're giving like passive aggressive or rude responses to reviews that have been given by residents. I've only seen that with one building and that was enough for me to not want to live there. I look at reviews all the time and I saw that the property management was just replying in like a kind of rude way to people who were not giving high reviews. And I don't want to deal with that. If I have a complaint as a resident and I'm paying my rent on time and I'm not breaking any rules, I want the property management team to take me seriously and try their best to reconcile and resolve any complaints I have. I don't want it to be that I make a complaint and you're being passive aggressive or you're trying to put the blame back on me. Like, I'm not dealing with that as a resident who's paying rent. So that's another red flag to look out for. I'd also say compare different reviews, both the high ones and the low ones. A lot of times with reviews, you can like see keywords. So it might be like insects, noise, locations. You can see like what people are saying about those things. Usually the keywords that pop up are things that are being typed in the most. So it would not hurt to just tap on those and see if they are good reviews or bad reviews about those specific categories. One of the first things I look up when I look at reviews is insects. Like I'll look up the word insects, roach, bug. I look all of them up. And if I see one review that says roach, I'm not living there. That's just me personally, because I don't mess with roaches like at all. So you can look up things like that and definitely see what kind of reviews you're seeing in terms of roaches or whatever it is that you're concerned about. I would say insects, noise, and safety are probably like some of the main things you'll see in reviews. Safety mostly in terms of like car break-ins or like just bad activity. Noise, if you're by like a highway or a train station, or if you're in a city in general, there's probably going to be noise. Like if you're living in a city, that's kind of hard to avoid. Obviously some places are worse than others. Location is really important. Like I said, if you're by like a highway or a train station or just living uptown, downtown, you gotta be aware of the fact that noise may come in differently. Also traffic, depending on where you live. If you're living like right in the city, if there's like a game or a concert, you should know that, you know, traffic may not be as ideal. So maybe that's another thing that you should look out for when you're looking at an apartment to potentially lease. Also guest parking. In general, guest parking tends to be a bit limited. But you want to be at a place where there are some parking spots for guests. At my old apartment, there were 5 spots for guests, and then the rest was street parking that you have to pay for. And they be giving people tickets and putting boots on cars. Like they are not playing with you if you do not pay for that street parking. At my new building, there's like a lot of guest parking, which I really appreciate, and they give you passes, which is nice because your pass expires either the same day or overnight depending on how long you need it for. But it's a lot better than just being in an apartment where it's free parking but you only have like 5 spots and someone could be camped out there for like 2 weeks and you have nowhere for your guests to park. Like that's very inconvenient, especially if you're living in a city where parking is more limited. And then the last thing I can think of is mail. So mail is one of those things that you don't really think about sometimes until you're actually living somewhere. So there are multiple ways that mail can be distributed to residents, specifically packages. Some apartments have lockers where you put in a code, some just put it in a room, some have fetch. So I would ask the apartment how they deliver packages. If they just have a room that's an open free-for-all, that's kind of concerning, unless of course they have cameras. So in my building, the way that they do it is we have lockers, and so you have to put a code in to get your package and you have to sign for it. If your package is oversized, it will be like left out, but there are cameras in our mail room and we have 24-hour concierge, so they're always looking at the mail room. So if God forbid someone steals your package, they're gonna know who did it. Another way that mail is often distributed is through fetch. So in my old building we did have fetch. I didn't mind fetch until I did. I had one bad experience with fetch. So the way that fetch works is fetch is a like company that receives a bunch of packages from a bunch of different apartment complexes. And then each resident has a special code that has to do with their building name and their unit number. And so then fetch delivery people, who are pretty much kind of like DoorDash or Uber Eats, it's just random people who decide to do delivery through fetch. They will collect your packages and drop them off right to your door. So it's nice because your package is delivered right to your door, and you can do like automatic deliveries or you can delay it. The only con I can think of is like you'll never get your packages right on time. Like if you get an Amazon package that delivers at 3, you might not get it till like 5 or 6 because it's being delivered to fetch and then it's being delivered to you, which isn't the biggest deal. But anyway, I had one bad experience with fetch, which was my best friend ordered me flowers on Valentine's Day, and I was like, you ordered me flowers, I'm not seeing them. So she gave me the address that she used, and it was my correct address. And then I got a random text message from someone, and it was a picture of my flowers, and they were like, hey, are these for you? And I was like, yeah. So somehow the fetch worker who's supposed to deliver my flowers delivered them to a whole different building. Like not even just a different unit, they delivered it to a whole different building. Luckily for me, the building was only like 10 minutes away from where I lived, so I just went there and picked up the flowers. But I'm just thinking, like, God forbid I would have ordered like a laptop or a camera or a luxury item and it got delivered to the wrong address and they didn't tell me. I would be in a bad position because a lot of times when you order something and it gets lost in the mail, the place that shipped it is not responsible. It's really up to the delivery service. So I would have to have a whole dispute and case with fetch, and that would just be so messy. I'm really glad that it was just flowers and the person that received them was kind enough and honest enough to tell me that they had my flowers. But I would definitely ask your future apartment how they deliver packages. I'll say if they use fetch, it's not like a red flag in my opinion. I only had one bad experience with fetch, but I will say that I personally prefer how my packages are delivered now, which is to a locker room when you put in a code and you sign for it, and it's always constantly being monitored. Alright, so that is my exhaustive list of things you should definitely look out for and ask questions about before you ever sign a lease or ever decide to move into an apartment building. I wish I would have known some of these things before I moved into my first apartment. Some of the things I did know and some things I learned as I was just in the process. So I hope this video is able to help at least someone watching. And if you have any other questions about moving into an apartment, leave them down in the comment section below. Let's have a conversation and help each other out. And if you want to see more content from me, I film bookish content, lifestyle content, and content specifically related to Charlotte, North Carolina as a 24-year-old living in the city. Hope you enjoyed this video. I love you so much, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.